The silence within the grand obsidian chamber of the High Synod was not merely an absence of sound. It was a physical weight, a suffocating pressure that bore down upon the chitinous shoulders of every delegate present. It was the silence of a civilization watching the pendulum of history pause at its apex, waiting to see if it would swing toward salvation or utter annihilation. High Exarch Vor, his carapace dulled by 4 centuries of life and 2 centuries of war, stared into the holographic abyss projected above the central dais. The visual feed was granular, distorted by the immense radiation of the local star, yet the terrifying geometry of the invading fleet was unmistakable. They were the Kizran hegemony, a scourge that had consumed star systems as a locust swarm consumes grain, their ships sleek, predatory shards of violet metal that seemed to cut the vacuum itself. Against this encroaching tide, against a blockade that spanned the entire orbital plane of the capital world, stood a single vessel. It was the human contribution, the aid they had promised. The Exarch felt a tremor of despair ripple through his mandibles. It was not a warship, it was a ruin. A rectangular, unadorned slab of corroded alloy, pitted by micrometeoroids and scarred by cosmic radiation, floating listlessly in the dark like a piece of industrial debris discarded by a careless god. The murmurs of the counselors grew from a nervous hum into a cacophony of panicked clicking and hissed accusations. Sub-Minister Kale, representing the mercantile guilds, slammed a clawed fist onto the obsidian table, shattering the delicate composure of the room. He pointed an accusing talon at the display, where the human vessel, the Hephaestus they had called it, drifted with no active shields, no weapons charging, and an energy signature so faint it barely registered above the cosmic background noise. Kale's voice was a shrill modulation of fear and betrayal. He demanded to know if this was a jest, a final insult from a species the Dominion had only recently contacted. They had petitioned the humans for aid, hearing rumors of their ancient lineage and their mastery of the physical sciences, but the Terran Union had sent only this, a single, silent tomb. Vor tried to maintain order, but his own heart sank. The Kizran fleet was not merely a military force, it was an extinction event. Their flagship alone, a leviathan of purple hull plating and pulsating weapon ports, dwarfed the human brick by an order of magnitude. The sensors indicated the enemy was charging their main lance batteries. The destruction of the capital was calculated to occur within 3 standard microcycles. The humans were not just underestimated, they were being pitied, and by extension, the Dominion was being mocked in its final hour. Within the sensory deprivation of the Hephaestus, the atmosphere was radically different. There were no flashing red lights, no klaxons wailing the song of impending death, no panicked crew running across decks. The bridge, if one could call the windowless circular room buried deep within the armored core a bridge, was bathed in a soft, amber glow. Commander Alina Vance sat in a chair of simple, ergonomic design, her fingers hovering over a haptic interface that felt more like playing a musical instrument than piloting a starship. She was not a soldier in the way the galaxy understood soldiers. She wore no armor, carried no sidearm. Her uniform was a dark, matte gray, unadorned save for a small, silver pin on her collar depicting a stylized open hand. She watched the tactical data flow directly into her neural link, feeling the hostile intent of the Kizran fleet as a physical pressure in her mind. Beside her, the ship's artificial intelligence, a consciousness born from eons of algorithmic evolution, whispered data streams into her auditory cortex. They were scanning the hull. They were laughing. The Kizran transmission had just come through on an open channel, a broadcast meant to terrify the planet below. They were demanding the human, scrap heap, power down its reactor and prepare to be boarded for salvage or be vaporized where it floated. Alina did not respond with anger. She did not open a channel to boast. She simply adjusted the inertial dampeners and exhaled slowly, her heartbeat steady, a metronome of calm in a chaotic universe. Back in the obsidian chamber, the Kizran opened fire. It was not a warning shot. A volley of plasma torpedoes, each capable of boiling a small ocean, streaked from the enemy vanguard toward the lone human ship. The counselors flinched, some turning away, unable to watch the inevitable incineration of their last, pathetic hope. The light of the weapon's fire washed over the chamber, blindingly bright, and Vor closed his 4 eyes, waiting for the sensor ghost of the Hephaestus to vanish. But the explosion never came. The light flared and died, replaced by a confusing readout on the main plot. The torpedoes had not impacted the hull. They had not been dodged. They had simply ceased to exist. At a distance of 5 kilometers from the human vessel, the plasma bolts had dissolved, their energy dissipated into harmless neutrinos, their matter unspooled into basic hydrogen. The Hephaestus remained exactly where it was, rotating slowly, its rust-colored flanks catching the light of the distant sun. Silence returned to the council chamber, but this time it was the silence of absolute confusion. Vor leaned forward, his mandibles trembling. The sensor technicians were frantically recalibrating, assuming a glitch, but the data remained stubborn. The energy of the attack had been absorbed. It was impossible. Thermodynamics forbade it. Yet the human ship drifted on, as unconcerned as a mountain in a gentle rain. The Kizrin, seemingly insulted by this violation of physics, escalated their assault. The enemy flagship, the World Breaker, moved forward, its massive spinal cannon charging with enough antimatter to crack the planet's crust. This was the weapon that had brought a dozen systems to their knees. The energy buildup was visible to the naked eye from the planet's surface, a growing star of violet hate. On the Hephaestus, Alina watched the energy spike. She tapped a sequence into her console, authorizing the disengagement of the primary safety interlocks. She did not want to kill them. Humanity had moved past the need for slaughter millennia ago, but the Kizrin were a young, aggressive species who understood only the language of force. To save the Dominion, she had to speak that language, but she would speak it with a grammar they had never heard. She activated the gravimetric shear. The human ship did not fire a beam. It did not launch a missile. It simply projected a mathematical correction into the local spacetime. To the observers in the council chamber and the terrified crews of the Kizrin fleet, the universe itself seemed to fold. The space around the Kizrin fleet began to warp. It was not the blue shift of a warp drive engaging, but a terrifying distortion of visual reality. The stars behind the enemy fleet smeared into streaks, and the darkness between the ships seemed to deepen, becoming a solid, abyssal black. The World Breaker fired its spinal lance. The beam, a coherent stream of antimatter, erupted from the prow, racing toward the human ship. But halfway to its target, the beam bent. It curved in an impossible arc, looping back upon itself like a snake eating its tail. The energy did not strike the Hephaestus. It was captured in a gravitational gravity well generated instantly by the human vessel, spinning harmlessly in a tight, glowing ring of contained fury. Then the Hephaestus moved. It did not accelerate, it transitioned. In 1 nanosecond, it was 5,000 kilometers away. In the next, it was in the center of the Kizrin formation. The ancient, rusty hull began to glow, the corrosion hiding a hull comprised of programmable matter that shifted and shimmered. The rust fell away, revealing a surface of perfect, seamless obsidian that absorbed all light. The ship was no longer a relic. It was a monolith of judgment. Panic erupted across the Kizrin comms, intercepted and played aloud in the Dominion Council. The enemy captains were screaming that their helm controls were unresponsive. Their reactors were being dampened remotely. Their weapons were locked. The human ship was broadcasting a signal now, not a threat, but a command code so ancient and foundational to galactic technology that the Kizrin computers recognized it as a root-level override. The humans were not hacking the systems. They were utilizing backdoors that had been written into the base code of galactic operating systems thousands of years prior, remnants of an era when humanity had seeded the stars with the first logic gates. The Dominion counselors stared in horror and awe. They had thought the humans were new to the galactic stage, a young race just leaving their cradle. They realized now, with a dawning, terrible clarity, that the humans were not new. They were returning. The ancient ship was not a piece of junk. It was a relic from a golden age that predated the Dominion, the Kizrin, and perhaps even the stars they orbited. Alina Vance spoke then. Her voice was amplified, projected across all frequencies, ringing in the bridges of the Kizrin ships and the halls of the Dominion citadel. She did not shout. Her tone was that of a weary teacher addressing unruly children. "This is the Terran vessel Hephaestus," she said, her voice layering over the static. "You have mistaken patience for weakness. You have mistaken restraint for inability. We do not carry weapons of war because we have outgrown the need to destroy. We manipulate the fundamental forces that allow your ships to exist. Stand down, or we will increase the local entropy of your fleet until your molecular bonds dissolve." It was a threat of such high-concept terror that Arar could barely comprehend it. Dissolving molecular bonds? She was threatening to turn the pride of the Kizrin Navy into dust without firing a shot. The Kizrin admiral, blinded by pride, ordered a ramming speed. The World Breaker surged forward, engines flared to maximum, a desperation maneuver to crush the tiny human ship. Alina sighed. She touched a single rune on her display. Entropy confirmed. The result was instantaneous and silent. The World Breaker, a vessel of millions of tons of hyperalloy, did not explode. It unraveled. Starting from the bow, the ship simply turned to gray dust. The majestic armor plating, the screaming crew, the antimatter cores, all of it lost cohesion. It was not a violent explosion of fire, but a sudden, terrifying disintegration. The ship rushed forward, and as it passed through the invisible field the Hephaestus projected, it became a cloud of inert, harmless atoms. The cloud washed over the human ship like smoke, leaving not a scratch. The remainder of the Kizran fleet froze. The horror of witnessing their flagship erased from existence by a mere thought broke them. One by one, their engines powered down. One by one, they broadcast their unconditional surrender. The Hephaestus sat amidst the cloud of what used to be a dreadnought, the black hull fading back to its deceptive, rusty camouflage. The battle was over. It had lasted less than 5 minutes. The aftermath was a blur of diplomatic confusion and existential dread. The Dominion Council, previously paralyzed by fear of the Kizran, now looked upon the humans with a different kind of terror. They had invited a monster into their home to kill a wolf. High Exarch Vor met the human delegation in the docking bay of the Citadel. He expected warriors, giants in power armor, cyborgs of war. Instead, the airlock hissed open to reveal Elena Vance and a small team of scientists in lab coats. They carried datapads, not rifles. They looked soft, vulnerable, their skin unarmored, their eyes tired. Vor struggled to reconcile the beings before him with the godlike power he had just witnessed. He approached Elena, his movement stiff with ceremony and fear. You saved us," he stammered, the translator synthesizing his clicks into trade common. "But we did not know. We did not know what you were." Elena looked up at the towering insectoid alien, her expression sorrowful. "We try to keep a low profile," she said softly. "Power attracts challenge. If we showed our true face, the galaxy would unite against us out of fear or try to steal what we have before they are ready to understand it." She gestured to the viewport where the Hephaestus hung in orbit, looking once again like a piece of drifting trash. "That ship is a seed keeper. It is a terraforming tool, High Exarch. The gravity drive, the entropy field, those are tools for mining asteroids and stabilizing stars. They were never meant for war. It is a tragedy that we had to use them as such." Vor felt his mind reeling. Mining tools? They had erased a dreadnought with a mining laser. The scale of the disparity between human technology and the rest of the galaxy was so vast it induced vertigo. "Why?" Vor asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why help us? You could rule this sector. You could rule the galaxy. The Kizran were strong and you broke them like dry twigs. Why play the part of the quiet neighbor?" "Because we tried ruling once," Elena said, and for a moment her eyes looked older than the stars outside. "Long ago, before your history began, we conquered, we expanded. We built empires that spanned spiral arms, and we found that it was empty. We nearly destroyed ourselves in the process. We learned that the only victory that matters is the preservation of life. We retreated. We hid our cities in folded space. We masked our ships as debris, and we watched. We became the gardeners of the galaxy, stepping in only when the weeds threatened to choke the garden entirely." She looked at Vor with intensity. "The Kizran were going to glass this world. That is a violation of the first mandate. Life must flow." The diplomatic reception that followed was subdued. There was no raucous celebration. The Dominion citizens looked at the humans with a mixture of reverence and unease. The humans shared technology, medical scanners that could cure plagues, previously thought terminal energy capacitors that could power cities for generations, but they held back the weapons. When asked, Elena simply smiled sadly and said, "You are not ready to hold the sun in your hands." It was a paternalism that would have been insulting had it not been proven so devastatingly true hours earlier. But as the cycles passed, the true reason for the Hephaestus's presence began to unravel. It wasn't just a rescue mission. In the private sanctum of the High Exarch, Elena requested a closed meeting with Vor and the senior leadership. The atmosphere was heavy. The human ambassador placed a small, crystalline device on the table. It projected a star map of the galaxy, but it was unlike any map Vor had seen. It showed currents of dark matter, the skeletons of the universe, and it showed a shadow, a creeping coldness entering the galaxy from the intergalactic void. "The Kizran were not attacking you for territory," Elena revealed, her voice dropping an octave, losing its diplomatic sheen and becoming the voice of a commander once more. "We interrogated their navigation logs. They were running. They were fleeing their home sector." Vor stared at the map. "Fleeing, the Kizran fear nothing." "They fear this," Elena said, pointing to the shadow. "We call it the silence. It is an ancient signal, a resonant frequency that shuts down higher brain functions. It is an automated suppression system left over from a war that ended 1 billion years ago. It has reactivated. It is sweeping through the outer rim." The Kizran worlds went silent 3 months ago. The fleet that attacked you was the remnant, the survivors driven mad by panic, trying to carve out a bunker deep in the core worlds before the silence caught them. The revelation struck the Council like a physical blow. The war they had just fought, the terror of the Kizran invasion, was merely the ripple effect of a much larger stone dropped in the cosmic pond. The humans hadn't just come to save the Dominion from an invasion, they had come to establish a firebreak. The Hephaestus was not just a ship, it was a shield generator. The silence is coming here, Alina continued, her face pale. It travels at light speed. It will be here in 1 standard year. We cannot stop it alone. Our technology is advanced, yes, but we are few. We need you. We need the Dominion's industrial capacity. We need the Kizran's aggression, what's left of it, and we need the diversity of thought that this council represents. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every alien present. We spent 10,000 years hiding, thinking we could simply tend the garden. But the storm is coming, and a gardener is not enough. We need a forest to break the wind. We are revealing ourselves not to rule you, but to arm you, not with weapons of destruction, but with weapons of preservation. The realization dawned on Vor. The obliteration of the Kizran fleet was a demonstration, yes, but it was also a desperate plea. The humans were powerful, but they were terrified. This ancient, rusted ship, this repository of godlike physics, was trembling before the dark. The humans were not the saviors descending from on high. They were the elders waking the village because the wolves were at the door. The dynamic in the room shifted instantly. The fear of the humans evaporated, replaced by a shared, galvanizing dread of the unknown. The Dominion was no longer a victim. It was a recruit. "What must we do?" Vor asked, his voice steadying. The politician was gone, the exarch remained. "We must build," Alina said. "We will give you the schematics for the Aegis arrays. You must build them on every moon, every station, every asteroid in this system. We will link them with our network. If we can create a harmonic resonance strong enough, we can drown out the silence. We can push it back." She paused, and for the first time the calm mask of the human cracked, revealing a deep, ancient exhaustion. "We failed to stop it the last time eons ago. That is why our civilization collapsed and we went into hiding. We will not fail this time, but we cannot do it alone." The story of the Hephaestus spread through the Dominion, not as a tale of conquest, but as a legend of unity. The ancient ship no one feared became the symbol of the new alliance. The rusty hull was not repaired. It was left as it was, a reminder that strength does not always look like polished chrome and violet fire. Strength was endurance. Strength was the wisdom to know when to fight and when to build. The Dominion fleets, once prepared to flee, now worked alongside human drones, constructing massive crystalline towers on the surfaces of their worlds. The Kizran survivors, broken and humbled, were integrated into the defense forces, their aggression channeled into the frantic labor of survival. Months turned into the final countdown. The year passed. The shadow on the edge of the sensors grew closer. The stars in the outer rim began to wink out, not destroyed, but simply silent, no transmissions, no telemetry, just a void where civilizations used to be. The silence arrived on a Tuesday, a mundane day in the Dominion calendar. It hit the outer sensor buoys first. The data stream simply stopped. It wasn't a jamming signal, it was the cessation of the desire to communicate. It was a wave of apathy, so profound it caused AI systems to shut down. But then the Aegis activated. The Hephaestus, positioned at the sun's zenith, acted as the conductor. Alina Vance stood on her bridge, her mind linked to the ship, her consciousness expanding to touch the me. NDS of 1 billion Dominion citizens. The array fired. It was not a beam of light. It was a song. A complex multitonal frequency that represented the chaotic, messy, beautiful noise of life. It was the sound of markets haggling, of children crying, of politicians arguing, of lovers whispering. It was the antithesis of the silence. The collision of the two forces was silent in the vacuum, but psychically deafening. Every sentient being in the system felt it, a wave of pressure, a headache that bloomed behind the eyes, and then, release, the silence broke. Like a wave crashing against a cliff, the apathy shattered against the wall of the Aegis. The signal dissipated, scattering into harmless static. The sensors lit up. The stars in the rim were still there. The civilizations were waking up, shaking off the cosmic stupor. In the grand obsidian chamber, the lights flickered and stabilized. High Exarch Vor looked at the holographic plot. The shadow was retreating. The Hephaestus drifted on the screen, its energy signature low, its hull creaking from the strain. It looked more like junk than ever, smoke venting from its secondary ports. But to Vor and to the billions watching, it was the most beautiful thing in the universe. The humans had not conquered the galaxy. They had not burned the Dominion. They had simply held the door open so the light could stay in. Elena's voice came over the comms, weak, strained, but alive. The storm has broken Exarch, but the weather is always changing. We have much work to do. Vor stood up, his 4 eyes glistening. He tapped his claw on the table, a rhythm of respect. Then let us begin, Ambassador. The Dominion is ready to learn. The narrative of the universe had shifted. The humans were no longer the unknown variable, the feared anomaly. They were the old guard, the keepers of the flame. And as the Dominion ships moved to assist the damaged Hephaestus, towing the ancient giant into a repair dock, the galaxy felt a little less cold, a little less dark. They knew now that even in the deepest silence, there was a ship that would not fear, a ship that would stand until the end of time, holding the line for those who could not. The ancient ship that no one feared had become the ship that everyone loved, not for its power to obliterate, but for its power to endure. The final image was not of a fleet in ruins, but of a single human engineer floating in zero-G outside the hull of the Hephaestus, welding a patch over a blast mark. A Kizran warrior in a vac suit floated next to him, holding the light. They did not speak. They simply worked, 2 specks of life against the infinite canvas, repairing the shield that protected them all. The camera pulled back further and further until the ship and the station and the star were just points of light in the swirl of the galaxy, a galaxy that was noisy, chaotic, and gloriously, defiantly alive. The darkness pressed in, but the light pushed back, and that was enough.